Tyler O'Neill has provided a huge offensive spark for the Boston Red Sox this year, but will he return after this season?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well check it out because Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome to Locked On Red Sox, the show where I try to stay as positive as I can until the Red Sox no longer give me a choice to stay positive. And I'm one of those people that can't fully call it quits until it's officially over and they are mathematically eliminated. But with the way that they generally have played since the All-Star break, it is a fair assumption to feel like, they're hanging on that slightest bit of hope right now with the wild card. But it doesn't feel like they are quite there because they haven't been consistent enough when they are winning to show that they can make that last wild card spot. So we'll see what happens here over the next few weeks, but this is going to be a big offseason coming up here for this Boston Red Sox team. And Craig Breslow is definitely going to be on the hot seat because so far from what he's done in his time here, certain things just have not panned out, especially what's been going on since the trade deadline. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit later on the show, the trade deadline he had and why that has failed so much for the Red Sox. I'm also going to be talking a little bit more about the comeback Netflix series that is supposed to be coming out in October, which I'm very excited about. But generally, this offseason is going to come with a lot of decision making for the Red Sox, and that includes decisions on players in the outfield like Tyler O'Neill. O'Neill was somebody who the Red Sox traded for in the offseason and has provided a lot of power for the Red Sox lineup that didn't have a lot of home run heavy hitters in it prior to him coming over, and he provided some versatility in the lineup because he's a right-handed bat and the Red Sox are just stacked with left-handed hitters. So he was able to provide a little bit more versatility when it comes to his abilities on offense. And he just crushes home runs. And he does it quite a bit. I mean, Monday night, he had another 2-home run game. And Rob Refsnyder also hit 2 home runs in the game. They went back to back twice in the Red Sox huge win on Monday night over the Orioles. And they were in the 3rd and the 8th innings when Refsnyder went deep and then O'Neill went deep right after him. The last time Red Sox teammates did that was on April 19th, 1994, when Mo Vaughn and Tim Naehring did it in the 2nd and 6th innings of the same game, going back to back twice. So certainly a piece of history that was made, but O'Neill just continues to crush baseballs. That was his 2nd 2-homer game in 3 days and his 7th multi-homer performance of 2024. In that game on Monday night, he went 3 for 5 with the 2 solo home runs and an RBI groundout, and the Red Sox went on to win the game 12-3. But he tagged Cade Povich and Cole Irvin for solo homers in the 3rd and 8th innings, respectively, bringing his home run total to 29 on the year. And his career high is 34 home runs in a season. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets to that. But I certainly would have no doubts if he did. But the other interesting thing about what happened on Monday night between Refsnyder and O'Neill, going back to back twice in the same game, is that they are the first Red Sox teammates to each record 10 total bases in a game since David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez on September 20th, 2005 versus Tampa Bay. Now, each record 10 total bases. That is the key here. That's quite an accomplishment, and it's a lot. So what a game for both of them, and what a season Tyler O'Neill is having. I mean, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to stay healthy all season, which was something that I was worried about going into the season, was his ability to stay on the field and whether he'd be able to provide a lot of value if he's missing games quite a bit, because he's sidelined with an injury. So he has had some injuries throughout the course of the season, but when he is out there, he's been able to absolutely mash baseballs, and it has provided a spark that this Red Sox offense has really needed. So it certainly has been a breakout season for him. But the question now is going to be, what happens going into 2025? Does he come back to the Red Sox? Does he not? He is a free agent after this year. And if they don't re-sign him and he decides to go elsewhere, they're losing some serious right-handed pop in the middle of the lineup that could hurt them down the road. It has worked out really well for the Red Sox this year in terms of his offensive productivity, and not even to mention just how good his defense really is. But this will be just the second season of his 7-year big league career that he will appear in over 100 games. So that's the other thing too, is he generally has been pretty healthy. Yes, he has experienced his injuries this year, but overall, he has been able to stay healthier than he has in past seasons, which has been great for the Red Sox. But the timing couldn't be better for him in terms of when he's hitting free agency, because I'm sure he'll have a lot of suitors after him going into the 2025 season. But the question just is, do the Red Sox want to bring him back? Does he want to come back to Boston? Just lots of decisions there that have to be made. And losing him would sting a little bit, but it's hard to argue with an outfield of Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, and Cedar Rafaela, and Roman Anthony, the now number 1 prospect in baseball, by the way, eventually coming up, that Tyler O'Neill fits into that equation. Theoretically, if they got healthy seasons out of both Tristan Casas and Trevor Story next year, that could help fill the void that O'Neill would be leaving in the lineup. So from the standpoint of wanting to keep that right-handed bat there, it would make sense for him to come back to Boston and the Red Sox to think about how he makes a difference. But because they have some solid outfielders on the roster already, and Roman Anthony is just waiting in the rafters to make his big league debut, I really wouldn't be surprised if they let him walk, because unless they swing a trade involving a different outfielder on the roster and it opens up a spot, their money might be better spent elsewhere on other positions that are of need for this team going into next season. Because if you think about it, they definitely need to spend money on pitching. That's something that is going to be of dire need for this team as we head into next year. And if the Red Sox are looking to really get pieces that are going to help put them over the top heading into next season, they are going to need to seek out players who are at a high level, and that's going to mean guys who are expensive. And when you look at Tyler O'Neill and what he brings to the table with this Red Sox team, yes, they will be missing that right-handed bat, which they would need to likely acquire somebody else that's a right-handed bat, or hope that they can compensate with what they have in his absence. But since outfield is such a deep position on this Red Sox team right now, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for O'Neill to come back to Boston. So you have to wonder if he will, or you have to wonder if he is going to go elsewhere. But if I had to put money down on it, I would say he is going to go elsewhere and not be back with Boston, because I don't think the Red Sox will feel a need to re-sign him. And I feel like he'll have a lot of teams pursuing him to the point where he won't have a problem going elsewhere, and he won't really need to return to the Boston Red Sox to make that happen, especially when the Red Sox have made it pretty clear how invested they are in the future and focusing on the young guys who can make an impact now and later on. And O'Neill is somebody who is older, than some of these other outfielders they have on the team right now. So I could see them wanting to just invest in those young guys, let them be the outfield of the future, and let O'Neill walk. But he has been very good for this Red Sox team, and it certainly will be a loss if the Red Sox end up losing him. So we'll see what happens with him after this season. But coming up, I mean, the Red Sox had a trade deadline that everybody had high hopes for, and so far it hasn't exactly been panning out for them. So I'm going to be discussing that next. Game Time is the perfect ticketing vendor that gives you the best prices and really good seats. I actually was just on Game Time yesterday getting tickets for a Hartford Yard Goats playoff game, the local AA baseball team that plays here in Connecticut that's affiliated with the Colorado Rockies. So that should be a lot of fun. They are in playoff mode now. And so my fiance and I are going to a game, and I use Game Time to get the tickets because the tickets were a lot cheaper than they were on other ticketing vendors, and we're only sitting a few rows back. So Game Time absolutely makes a difference in your ticket buying experience, and not just for sporting events. You can do it for comedy shows, concerts, you name it. Game Time has those events on there. Game Time does also have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Make sure that you are utilizing Game Time regularly whenever you want to go to an event, because I promise you it'll save you so much money compared to other ones. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Game Time makes sure that you get the best seats possible, or they will give you 110% of the difference back in a refund if it's not the best experience for you. I love it. I've been using it for a long time, so I highly recommend you do too. I also recommend checking out Locked On MLB right after this if you're looking to hear more about what's going on with other teams across Major League Baseball. Host Paul Sullivan, also known as Sully, is very knowledgeable about Major League Baseball and everything that goes on in that world. So he's available wherever you get your podcasts. So when you finish Locked On Red Sox, check out his show. He can keep you updated on teams like the Royals and Twins that the Red Sox are chasing in the wild card race. Speaking of the wild card race, the Red Sox chances of making the playoffs were looking a lot higher right before the All-Star break than they have been since the All-Star break. And what is annoying about it is that things were starting to click for this Red Sox team. The offense was crushing baseballs while simultaneously the pitching was really pulling itself together from the standpoint of the rotation, especially, and even the bullpen was starting to pull things together. And the bullpen still needed reinforcements, which the Red Sox went out and got. But so far, based on what they got at the trade deadline, it hasn't exactly worked out to the point where it's helping the Red Sox to get immediate results and get to the point where they can be competitive. And they've actually kind of gone downhill generally since that trade deadline. And it's tough because everybody wanted to feel like they could trust Craig Breslow and the moves that he was making. But so far, he hasn't proven to be overly reliable in terms of going out and identifying the best talent to put this team in a position to be able to succeed. And that's really tough to see because we need somebody in here in his role who's going to be able to make the right judgment call on which players should be coming to Boston and not coming to Boston. And the trade deadline that he did have at the time, people had every reason to believe that a playoff spot was within reach for the Red Sox because they sat just 1.5 games below the postseason cut line on the morning of the deadline. So the team opted to buy, bringing in some reinforcements to help shore up their weaknesses and set the team up for a strong finish. But from then to now, things really haven't worked out with those guys that they have acquired at the trade deadline. They made 5 moves, and 4 of which were primarily intended to bolster the big league roster now. Obviously, James Paxton was the first one. He had been inconsistent but available through his first half season in LA, but he only made it 5 pitches into his third start with the Red Sox before he suffered a partially torn calf that will sideline him for the rest of the season now. Obviously, that's not Breslow's fault that he got hurt, but again, their big trade deadline acquisition that now likely can't play the rest of the season when he was trying to get a starter in there who could eat innings. So that was definitely unfortunate. He ultimately posted a 4.09 ERA in just 11 innings in his second stint with the Red Sox. But the 2 most urgent additions were the moves that they made to address the bullpen in Louis Garcia and Lucas Sims, but those both wound up being pretty bad misses by the Red Sox. Sims allowed 9 earned runs in 10 innings with the team, and Garcia allowed 13 earned runs in 11.1 innings. Both of these players are now on the injured list, and their inability to stabilize the Red Sox crumbling bullpen played a huge role in the team's second half collapse. Because if you think back to right after the All-Star break and going into the trade deadline and the moves the Red Sox made at the trade deadline, the bullpen was the glaring weakness for this team at that time. They needed to go out there and get some arms to contribute in relief roles to be able to put the Red Sox in a position to land a wild card spot. That did not exactly happen because Sims and Garcia both were not performing even. And obviously, again, now they're on the IL, not the team's fault. They couldn't know that. There was no way for them to know they were going to get injured. But even if you take out the injuries, prior to that, they were not performing for the Red Sox and they were not reliable. And that's a really bad look considering what they gave up for these guys. They gave up 4 prospects for Garcia. So it's definitely a tough look. And they are guys who will both be free agents after this year. I'm not thinking the Red Sox are going to re-sign them. If they re-sign either, it would likely be Sims because I think he showed a little bit more promise and at least pitched in a couple high leverage situations and was able to get the Red Sox out of it. So from that standpoint, if they were to re-sign one of those 2, I would say it would be Sims, but I'm not seeing them likely re-sign either. I feel like they'll just let them both walk in free agency and they'll decide to completely revamp this bullpen from scratch. So that was an issue in itself. And then they acquired Danny Jansen, who just has not been productive at the plate for the Red Sox. He's only batting .207 with 2 home runs and a .592 OPS in 20 games with the team. And his splits against left-handed pitchers aren't anything special, which is disappointing because the Red Sox acquired him as a right-handed bat that could help stabilize the lineup against lefties because the Red Sox overall are very lefty-heavy in their lineup. So in order to try to fix that, they went out and acquired Danny Jansen, who was supposed to be the big right-handed bat that was supposed to get them back on track against lefties and be the guy who they could rely on in those situations. But unfortunately, that has not happened as he has not panned out so far for the Red Sox. They also acquired him because defensively, he's a better catcher than Reese McGuire. So it's a defensive upgrade for sure, but it's not really an offensive upgrade. I mean, not that Reese was great offensively either, but Jansen just has not been performing to the level that he needs to be performing at with this Boston Red Sox team. It's really impossible to know how another player would have performed had they come to Boston instead, because obviously you never know with environment. Boston is an intense environment to play, so not everybody can handle that. But with the benefit of hindsight right now, it is clear that there are a few guys the Red Sox could have landed who may have helped them a little bit better, like a couple relievers who have been performing since the trade deadline on the respective teams that they're on right now. And it's just tough because you can look at all these players and conclude that the Red Sox went about things the wrong way or shouldn't have been buyers in the first place. But it ends up being more complicated than that because they hadn't gotten anywhere by just standing pat or by trying to buy and sell at the same time. So I do respect Craig Breslow's decision to pick a lane and commit and actually move on from some prospects to acquire guys to try to help the team right now. So I don't think the decision to buy was the wrong decision, because where they were at the time, it made sense. The wrong decision more has to do with the moves that they did make and what those guys have been doing or lack thereof to help this team to succeed. And now going into this offseason, Breslow's going to be on the hot seat again, because people are going to start to be asking, is he capable of pushing the right buttons and acquiring the right players to help this Boston Red Sox team? I mean, they have some free agents this year. Obviously, we talked about Tyler O'Neill already, but Kenley Jansen, Nick Pivetta, Chris Martin, Danny Jansen, Luis Garcia, Lucas Sims, like I talked about, Lucas Giolito, but there is a player option for him, which he is likely to exercise since he didn't pitch this year. So it'd be hard for him to pick up a deal elsewhere. So he'll likely still be here. But the pitching situation is tough. They need to really revamp the pitching staff. And so far, it hasn't been a great look on Breslow in terms of the pitchers that he has acquired yet since being here. So there's going to be a lot of natural pressure on him going into this offseason of people asking, is he capable of pushing the right buttons and acquiring the right pitchers that this Red Sox team needs right now? And I think it's very reasonable to look at this whole situation and say, okay, if the Red Sox don't acquire pitching this offseason, then they will not go anywhere next year. I don't care what the position players are looking like, what the talent level is of the position players. None of that will matter if they don't acquire the right pieces this offseason that will put them in the best position to succeed from a pitching standpoint. So that's what I am concerned about with Craig Breslow, is what kind of offseason is he going to have, and is he going to be able to get the right guys? Because obviously when it comes to just straight up signing free agents, that's not Craig Breslow's call. That is ownership's call. They need to give him permission to be able to offer these big contracts to players. And that's another issue in itself. But the issue with Breslow is more, he did buy at the deadline and he did acquire some pieces, but why is it that those pieces are not performing? That's not an ownership thing. That's a misjudgment on him. And it starts to be a scenario where people are asking, hey, what's the deal here? Is Breslow capable of making the right moves or not? So as we go into the offseason and the Red Sox start to think about the moves that they need to make or are not going to make, guys that they're going to keep around, what does that look like for Breslow and company? And what exactly are they going to do to turn this team from being a borderline playoff team to being a definite playoff team? And I don't want a team that is hot and cold. Some days they look like one of the best teams in the league who could beat anybody, and other days they look like a complete train wreck who just has nothing going for them and nothing is going right. Like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want that inconsistency. I want a team that's going to be able to win on a consistent basis and be a team that we can talk about as being a potential playoff team every year, because that's what the Boston Red Sox organization is. So Craig Breslow is certainly on the hot seat going into this offseason after how the trade deadline acquisitions have panned out for him and this Boston Red Sox team. Pressure is absolutely on him. And the pressure is also on Netflix to supply a very good documentary for the Red Sox in honor of the 2004 team. So coming up, I'm going to be diving a little bit more into that and what we could expect from it. If you're looking for a fun way to play daily fantasy sports, PrizePicks is the perfect place for you. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And all you have to do is just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks picks that you make are still alive. They also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can literally double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. How amazing is that? With a lot of these other apps, you have to have everything right in order to make the money, but PrizePicks does not require that. Just download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. I'm telling you, PrizePicks will ensure that you win lots of money. So if you want to do that, you really should check it out today. Speaking of checking things out, the Red Sox have 2 Netflix documentary series coming out. One on October 23rd that is dropping called The Comeback 2004 Boston Red Sox. And I am very excited for this one because it will be chronicling the team's journey to the 2004 World Series and will go through the entirety of that season and the comeback 20 years later. It's a 3-episode series, and it includes interviews with players like Pedro Martinez, David Ortiz, Kevin Millar, legends that were on that team. And they will be telling the story of how exactly the Red Sox broke their 86-year championship drought, and just looks back at one of the greatest comebacks in sports history. For some of us like Red Sox fans, it was the greatest comeback in sports history because we were able to sit there and celebrate and enjoy it as Red Sox fans. It's directed by Colin Barnacle, and it will also take a look into the Red Sox's feud with the Yankees, which will be very juicy, which is so fun. And viewers will be able to hear also from those that helped make the historic victory possible, including former manager Terry Francona, former general manager and vice president Theo Epstein, and more people around the Red Sox front office who helped to make that happen that year. So it's going to be very exciting. And one thing I enjoy about it is that it's multiple episodes. I have seen a couple hour-and-a-half movie documentaries about the 2004 Red Sox. And obviously they don't go as much in depth because it's a shorter time frame and it needs to be over by the time that hour-and-a-half or whatever the timeline is done. So they may have to skip over some parts. But what I like about this being a 3-part documentary series is that they can really dive into the ins and outs of what went on during that 2004 season and make sure that they're hitting all of the key aspects of what went on that season. And it gives them the flexibility to expand on things, because I feel like in those movie documentaries that I've watched on the team, there have been things that I found myself when I'm sitting there wanting to know more about, and they end up having to move on to the next subject so they can fit in everything that they want to fit in. So I'm curious to see how exactly they're going to break down the 3 parts, but I would imagine each of the 3 parts has a theme to it. And within that theme, they'll be able to share some stories based on the interviews that they have, and being able to really showcase even the little moments of that season that we as fans might not even know about. So this is a really appropriate time for them to do it, with it being the 20-year anniversary of the 2004 Boston Red Sox, which for those of you who haven't been turning in for a while to this show and aren't regular listeners, I did do a 10-part series earlier this season at honor of the 20-year anniversary of the 2004 Red Sox. You could look back at those episodes. I did have a couple cool guests on there, like Bronson Arroyo, who came on and talked about that season and what it was like coming back and making history against the Yankees. So you could go back and check that out, but I am curious to see how this 3-part documentary pans out in terms of how they're structuring it and what exactly each episode is going to be about. But the nice thing about it is that they will be able to do it their way and it hopefully won't feel like they're rushing or skipping over some topics, because I really want to hear them go in depth about all the little things that went on with the Red Sox in that season. So I'm really excited for that. And then another series about the Red Sox is coming next year, documenting the 2024 season with exclusive interviews from players, coaches, and executives. So the Netflix team has been following the Red Sox around a lot throughout the course of this season, because they are starting a series on Netflix where they're going to start showcasing teams throughout the course of a season. And the Boston Red Sox were the first team that they picked to do that, which makes sense because the Red Sox are one of the most historic franchises in Major League Baseball. And there's just so much history attached to the Red Sox that they probably found like they were an interesting team to cover. And what's interesting about this season in particular is that there have been some highs, but there have also been lots of lows. And how exactly does Netflix cover the highs and the lows of the season, but put a spin on it that keeps fan engaged in watching the documentary? Because fans aren't going to want to relive all of the bad moments that took place during the 2024 season. They're going to want to relive the better days and some of the best wins that this team has had over the course of this season. But for that documentary, I'm interested in seeing the way that Netflix puts a spin on it that allows for them to really tell the full story. And I'm sure they'll have to start with the off season and Craig Breslow coming in and making moves that he did to try to improve this team even before the season started. And they're going to have to start at the beginning, and they're going to have to talk about guys who have really developed a lot this season, like Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, and Cedar Rafaela. They're going to have to talk a lot about those guys, and even Jarren Duran winning All-Star Game MVP. That's another big thing that happened this season. So you can point to lots of different things and events that took place throughout the course of this Red Sox season that would make sense for Netflix to cover. But the question is, how much of a deep dive are they going to go into it? How many parts is this one going to be? Is it going to be much longer than the 2004 one because they feel like they have more content because they were actually out filming this team constantly this year? Are they going to be showing clips from the locker room and just Alex Cora talking to the team and what the vibes are like after wins, after losses? Like, I want to see all of that stuff, the behind the scenes stuff that we as fans don't always get to see. And I want to see the way that this team reacted to the hardships that they experienced this year. So all the injuries that they went through and players getting hurt or not performing up to expectations, like a lot of the players I've talked about on today's show who have not been performing to the level that the Red Sox have wanted them to perform at. So I'm curious to see a lot of what takes place and how they present that information and what exactly they cover in regards to this team. Do they touch on any future stuff? Like, here's why the Red Sox future is bright. Here are the players who will be big contributors down the road. Like, there's so many different directions that this can go in. And I can't wait to hear more about how exactly this show is going to be structured and what exactly it entails and what we can look forward to being Red Sox fans, because you have a great docuseries coming out on a Red Sox team that everybody wants to look back on and remember in 2004. Then you have a 2024 team with lots of mixed feelings and frustration built into it throughout the course of it. So I'd be curious to then see how they structure that and how they present the information. So very exciting stuff for Red Sox fans over the next couple of years, with a couple hopefully entertaining documentaries coming out about our favorite baseball team, which gives you things to watch on your TV and add to your watch list. So we'll see how that gets presented. And I'm really excited for both of them really to drop. But don't forget to check out Locked On MLB right after this, wherever you listen to podcasts. And as I always say, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.